They say that in your darkest moments, family is the place that will open its arms to welcome you back. I believed that for 32 years of my life, but then a short message in the family group chat tore that belief apart, leaving a crack in me that may never fully heal. My name is Rachel Miller, 32 years old, living in Denver, Colorado. On a freezing February day, I stood in Frankfurt Airport, having just said goodbye to my husband at a solemn military funeral. The image of the neatly folded triangular flag on his casket, the echoing sound of the salute shots in the air, and the faces of soldiers bowing their heads in respect still haunt me. I didn't cry when the casket was lowered. I didn't scream like in the movies. I just stood there, silent, my hands clenched so tightly that my nails dug into my skin. Pain that's too great doesn't come out as sound. It smolders, it chokes, like a storm trapped behind your rib cage. We had been together for 8 years, but most of that time was spent apart. Sudden deployments, holiday dinners with an empty chair at the table. Yet I never complained. I always believed that love isn't measured by the days spent together, but by the choice to stay, even when the distance stretches endlessly. Now that distance has become eternal. After the funeral, I packed my bags, preparing to return to Denver. I didn't expect a grand welcome, just one small thing: someone from my family to pick me up. I wanted a shoulder to lean on, a hug to remind me I wasn't alone. On the flight back, as the plane lifted off the ground, I opened my phone and sent a simple message to the family group chat. Flight lands at 3 p.m. Can anyone pick me up? No exclamation mark, no emoji, no plea. Just a question, a fragile hope. Less than 2 minutes later, my screen lit up. The first to reply was Daniel, my older brother. Busy, take an Uber. A moment later, my mom chimed in. You should have planned better. I stared at those two cold lines. My heart tightened. Not a single word of condolence, not a single question like, how is the funeral? Or, are you okay? Or even a simple, I miss you. Just blame and avoidance. My fingers trembled on the keyboard. I typed, deleted, typed again, and deleted again. In the end, I left just one short reply. It's fine. I closed my phone and leaned my head against the window. Outside, white clouds drifted in the sunset, but inside me was a thick, impenetrable darkness. I pictured landing. Other passengers would rush into the arms of loved ones, while I'd drag my suitcase to the taxi stand and step into my cold, empty apartment. The thought weighed heavy on my chest. For years, I'd grown used to being put last. Daniel was always my mom's pride and joy, the only son, the future of the family she always talked about. From a young age, I heard things like, girls are easy to marry off, but boys are the backbone. I excelled in school, earned scholarships, worked hard, but all I got were half-hearted nods, while Daniel's mere presence made my mom beam. I tried to make up for it by being patient, enduring. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I held on, one day they'd see me, acknowledge me. But the moment I read those two messages, I realized my hope was an illusion. I closed my eyes, and memories of the funeral flooded back. The trumpet's mournful notes, the hands raised in silent salute. They say a military funeral is a testament to noble sacrifice, but what I got from my own family was cold abandonment, a cruel contrast. On the long flight home, I had plenty of time to think. I wondered, why could they be so indifferent? Was my pain just an inconvenience to them? Or were they so used to me being strong that they thought I didn't need anyone? The truth is, in that moment, I needed them more than ever, and they didn't show up. They say, when you lose something, you find out who really cares. I lost my husband, and with him, my illusion of family. High above the clouds, amid the hum of the plane's engines, I felt my heart crack. But I didn't cry. I wouldn't let myself cry. I pulled my jacket tighter, took a deep breath. I knew I had to find a way to stand on my own, because no one else would do it for me. I thought about the road ahead. When the plane landed in Denver, there'd be no one waiting at the gate. No arms, no smiles. Just me and my suitcase. But maybe from that emptiness, a new journey would begin. I didn't know that the moment my family turned their backs, other doors would start to open. Doors to truth, to community, to a new definition of family. When the flight attendant announced, "We're crossing the Atlantic, expected to land in Denver at 3 p.m., I gripped my phone tightly. The "It's fine" message was still there, cold as a small gravestone. But deep down, I knew I was stepping into a completely different life. A life where I'd have to learn to find family in a new way, not through blood, but through true presence. I'm sharing this story not for pity, but because I believe there are others who felt what I felt, returning from pain only to face indifference. If you've ever felt alone among family, if you've ever longed for a hug but met only coldness, you'll understand me. And if you haven't, let my story remind you of one thing. Sometimes, a simple text, a timely embrace, can save a soul. Don't let someone you love write, "It's fine," when they're actually breaking. There are moments when you think you're prepared for loneliness. But when it hits, right in the middle of a bustling crowd, that emptiness can still swallow you whole. When the plane landed in Denver, my heart pounded as if it wanted to break free from my chest. I dragged my suitcase through customs, each step fueled by a faint hope that maybe they'd change their minds. Maybe Daniel or Mom would show up at the last minute. Maybe I'd see a hand waving in the sea of people. But when the automatic doors slid open, all I saw were families reuniting in tears and embraces. A young woman threw herself into the arms of her husband in uniform. Children ran to their fathers, laughter mixed with sobs. My heart ached as I realized I was just a bystander, unnoticed, uncalled. I pulled my suitcase forward. The sound of its wheels on the tile echoed the emptiness inside me. The joyful chatter around me cut like a knife into a fresh wound. I tried to keep my face composed, but inside, every shard was tearing me apart. Just then, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and 3 soldiers in dress uniforms stepped out. One of them nodded to me, his eyes sharp with solemnity. I'd never met them, but I knew instantly from their gaze. They were here in place of the family I didn't have. I walked toward them. One gently took my suitcase, while the other 2 stood on either side, forming a protective circle. I still held the folded triangular flag tightly, the last sacred relic of my husband. I heard a whisper in the wind. "I'm still with you." We walked together through the crowd of passengers and families, me in the center, dressed in black, silently clutching the flag, with 3 soldiers in crisp uniforms behind me, shoulders squared, steps in sync. No words were spoken, but their silence was louder than the cheers around us. I didn't know that, at another corner of the airport, a local TV news crew was filming reunions. Their camera suddenly turned to me and lingered. The image of me, a lone woman amid joyful reunions, flanked by 3 solemn soldiers, made it into their lens. That scene later aired on the evening news, becoming a moment the community couldn't forget. But in that moment, I just kept walking, trying not to collapse. As we neared the car, a reporter approached, holding a microphone, her eyes full of sympathy. I didn't want to talk, didn't want my words to become fodder for discussion. I pulled out a piece of paper I'd prepared and handed it to her. On it, I'd written, "Don't look for those who abandon you. Look to those who choose to show up." Then I pulled my coat tighter, stepped into the SUV, and closed the door. The car pulled away, leaving behind flashing cameras and stunned faces. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, flipping on the TV without really intending to watch. But then, the evening news came on. My image appeared right after the weather forecast. The anchor's voice was calm. A widow returning from her husband's military funeral overseas. No family, no one to greet her, but not alone. 3 soldiers stood behind her like an unbreakable wall. The screen showed a close-up, me in black, holding the triangular flag, with 3 soldiers walking behind. The camera caught the moment I turned my head, my eyes glinting with a mix of pride and pain. Then it cut to the paper I'd left, my words displayed clearly. I watched silently, no tears falling, but my heart tightened. Not because of the sudden attention, but because I knew. My family was watching this somewhere, seeing it all. And as I expected, they did. I didn't need to ask to know. My mom probably dropped her wine glass on the tiled floor. Daniel, my brother, likely froze at the words I'd written. But unlike me, they couldn't hide. The whole city would know. The whole community would talk. Their silence had been exposed to the light. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages poured in. From friends, colleagues, even strangers. They said they admired me. They said they saw themselves in me. But the family group chat, where it all began, remained silent. Not a single message, not a single apology. Just a thick, heavy silence, like a stone slab. That night, I sat by the window, looking down at Denver's sparsely lit streets. I knew that from the moment that footage aired, my life would never be the same. But I also knew I'd sent a clear message, without needing words. I saw their choice to stay silent, and I chose my own path. I didn't need to scream, beg, or argue. My actions, and the presence of strangers who showed loyalty, spoke louder than anything. That was true strength. But I also knew this was just the beginning. The silence wouldn't last forever. There would be reactions, justifications, calculations behind my mom's and Daniel's eyes. The question was, how would I face them when they tried to rewrite the story? Do you think that image was powerful enough to make my family change? Or would they find ways to deny, to justify? I'm about to tell you what happened after that broadcast, when those who abandoned me tried to claim my story. If you find this story compelling, please comment Y. If not, please comment N. They say silence can sometimes be the sharpest weapon. But for me, my family's silence only deepened the wound. A week after returning from my husband's funeral, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. When Denver's TV station called, inviting me to a special program to share my experience, I hesitated. I didn't want to turn my pain into a public spectacle, but then I remembered the note I left at the airport. Don't look for those who abandon you. Look to those who choose to show up. If I stayed quiet, wouldn't I be letting silence win again? So I agreed. That day, I walked into the small studio, lights glaring on my face, the room so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. When the host asked, "Rachel, what happened when you returned from your husband's military funeral?" I took a deep breath and answered firmly. I buried my husband with honor and came back to silence. Not one family member came to pick me up. Only 3 soldiers from his old unit. Blood doesn't make a family. Presence does. Those words hung in the air, freezing the room, and the host could only nod. No further words needed. The interview lasted 6 minutes. No background music, no edits, just me facing the camera, speaking in a hoarse but clear voice. When it aired during primetime nationwide, it sparked a massive reaction. Social media exploded, thousands of shares, hundreds of thousands of comments. Widows wrote, "You spoke for us." Veterans wrote, "We're proud you upheld the dignity of the fallen." I read each message, tears falling, both pained and comforted. But amid those messages, I thought of my mom and Daniel. They must have watched. And as I predicted, their reaction came quickly. Just hours later, my mom posted an old photo on Facebook. Me and Daniel as kids, holding hands at an Independence Day parade. Her caption read, "Family above all. Always." At first glance, it seemed like a heartfelt statement, but in this context, it felt like a flimsy shield, a hasty attempt to rewrite the truth. The comments below were not kind. "If family is so important, why didn't you pick up your daughter at the airport?" someone wrote. Another said bluntly, "Don't pretend. We saw everything." I didn't need to speak. The community did it for me. That night, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Didn't know it was that serious. You should have said something." I laughed bitterly. In his eyes, my return from my husband's funeral wasn't serious enough? Or did he think pain needed a formal announcement to matter? I typed and deleted several times, finally leaving just one line. "You chose. So did I." No exclamation mark, no elaboration. A short sentence, but it reflected clearly. His silence was a choice, and I'd chosen a different path. The next day, at the grocery store, an older woman stopped me, grabbed my hand, her eyes red. "I saw the news. My son was lost in Afghanistan. I know what it's like to be left alone. Thank you for speaking out. I hugged her, feeling for the first time in days real warmth from a stranger. The whole city became a mirror, reflecting the truth about my family. They couldn't hide anymore. And I saw clearly, when family turns away, there are still hands reaching out from unexpected places. 3 days later, a New York journalist called. The Denver story had gone national, even international. They wanted me to write an op-ed, expanding it into a story about support for military families. I realized this wasn't just my story anymore. It was becoming a symbol, and I had to keep moving forward, even with my heart still tangled. That night, alone in my apartment, I looked at the folded flag on the shelf and whispered to my husband, "You see? I did it. I didn't let silence win." Tears fell, but they weren't the choked sobs of abandonment anymore. They were the tears of someone finding strength in pain. I knew this wasn't the end. My mom and Daniel would surely try to justify, to explain, but I wasn't afraid anymore because for the first time, I knew I wasn't alone. A community stood behind me, just like those 3 soldiers at the airport. And indeed, I was right. Just days later, a movement began. Spouses, children, and parents of service members reached out, sharing their stories, wanting to act together, not just talk. A clear idea formed in my heart. If my family didn't choose to be there, I'd create a new family, a community where no one is left behind. If you want to hear more stories and struggles like mine and feel a connection to them, you can find my previous videos on this channel. Some nights, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the folded flag on the shelf, wondering, what if I keep living like this? Will my life just stop at the pain of abandonment and my family's silence? That question echoed in my mind until one day I realized the answer wasn't in waiting, but in action. I couldn't force my family to change, but I could create a different family, one where no one is left behind. That's when the idea for the Welcome Project was born. At first, it was just a sketch on a scrap of paper. I wrote, "Shuttle vans, meals, support groups, we've got you signs." 4 short lines, but to me, they were a promise to myself. If I had to walk out of a cold airport alone, I wouldn't let anyone else go through that. I started contacting people who'd messaged me after the broadcast, widows, veterans, even ordinary folks who wanted to help. To my surprise, within weeks, I had a list of dozens of volunteers from different states. They didn't ask for proof of my pain or pry into my family drama. They just said, "When do we start? I'm in." 2 months after I returned from Frankfurt, the first Welcome Project van rolled out at JFK Airport in New York. I still remember that moment. A group of 5 volunteers stood in the arrivals area, holding a white sign with bold black letters, "We've got you." 3 simple words, but they carried the strength of an entire community. When a young wife, holding her small child, stepped out with red eyes after her husband's funeral, she saw the sign and broke down right there. The volunteers didn't say much. They just walked over, hugged her, carefully loaded her suitcase, and drove her and her child to a temporary place we'd arranged. A photo of that moment went viral on social media. Within hours, tens of thousands of shares appeared with the caption, "This is real family." I sat looking at those photos, tears streaming down uncontrollably. Not from sadness, but because for the first time in months, I felt I'd done something meaningful. I wasn't the abandoned one anymore. I was the one reaching out to others. That transformation was so powerful I could hardly believe it. Within weeks, Welcome Project expanded to Dallas, then Chicago. Old white vans, patched with decals, became symbols of presence. We didn't have much money or big sponsors, but we had heart and volunteers willing to drive hours just to pick up a single family. I remember my first time participating in Dallas. As the automatic doors slid open, an elderly mother stepped out trembling, clutching a photo of her son. She'd expected to take a taxi home alone, but when she saw us with the "We've got you" sign, she froze, then burst into tears. I walked over, took her hand, and whispered, "You're not alone." Her hand was ice cold, but it gripped mine like a lifeline. In that moment, I realized I was filling the void my own family had left, not just for me, but for so many others. Then came the first vigil, a candlelit memorial hosted by the military community. Hundreds gathered under the flickering glow of tiny candles. I stood before the crowd, hands shaking as I held the microphone. The eyes of hundreds followed me, making my throat tighten. But I knew I had to speak. I took a deep breath and repeated the last words my husband wrote in a letter. "Don't let silence beat you." Those words echoed in the quiet night, mingling with the breeze. I saw faces nod, eyes well up. And in that moment, I understood that Welcome Project wasn't just an organization, it was a response to silence, proof that human connection can overcome abandonment. Meanwhile, my blood family remained silent. Not a call from my mom, not a text from Daniel. The family group chat stayed empty like an abandoned house. But strangely, I no longer felt alone. I had strangers who became family, a community that chose to show up, a network of unconditional embraces. I'd found my family, not in blood, but in shared presence. Each day, I grew more certain I was on the right path. The small project was now mentioned in articles, even approached by national programs for interviews. But more than anything, every photo, every thank you from those we picked up at airports became my greatest motivation. It was proof I hadn't let silence win. I sat reading community comments. "Thank you for redefining family. You gave us faith that we're not alone." Each line fueled me to keep going, and deep down, I knew this was just the start. I couldn't have imagined that during one event, I'd unexpectedly come face to face with a familiar figure, the brother who'd left me at the airport that day. That moment would turn my world upside down again. I once thought some family wounds would never heal. The coldness at the airport that day left a deep scar, a reminder that my brother chose silence over presence. But 6 months later, fate brought me to another airport, and there, I saw something that shook my entire world. It was a sweltering afternoon in Dallas. I was there to oversee a Welcome Project volunteer group. We'd gotten word of a flight from Afghanistan landing, carrying service members and their families. Many would return to no one waiting. That's when we were ready. The white sign with "We've got you" was up. The van waited outside, hot meals ready in insulated containers. I stood among the crowd, watching every detail. New volunteers looked nervous, while veterans of the group smiled warmly. In the golden light of the arrivals hall, I suddenly saw a familiar figure, a tall man in a simple shirt, carefully buckling a 5-year-old girl into the back seat of a van. His hands were patient, his eyes gentle, every movement deliberate, as if afraid to startle her. My heart clenched. I knew instantly it was Daniel, my brother. In that moment, memories flooded back. The cold, busy, take an Uber text. The silent family group chat for months. The nights I cried, feeling abandoned. And now, the man who left me to walk out of an airport alone was at another airport, quietly caring for the child of a stranger. I didn't approach. I just watched from a distance, my heart pounding. He didn't know I was there. He didn't tell anyone who he was. To everyone else, he was just a new volunteer, a regular driver in the Welcome Project team. I wondered, why was he here? Was he trying to make amends? Or was he just curious? But watching him gently lift the girl out of the van, tie her shoelace, and smile at her young mother, I knew. No one could fake that kind of care. This wasn't for show. This was real change from within. That evening, I attended a vigil, a candlelit memorial for fallen service members. The square glowed with hundreds of tiny flames. I stood in the crowd, clutching my candle, emotions surging. And then, at the edge of the crowd, I saw him again. Daniel stood there, silent, not approaching. His eyes were red, shoulders trembling slightly, his candle's flame flickering as if afraid to shine too brightly. He looked at me, but quickly turned away. He couldn't face me. In his stance, I saw a mountain of regret weighing him down. In that moment, part of me wanted to turn away, to leave him with his late remorse. But another part, the part that once craved just a small gesture from family, made me nod slightly. A small, wordless nod. But it was a nod of acknowledgement. I saw his effort, and for the first time, I chose forgiveness. Daniel froze. He looked at me again, eyes wet, then bowed his head. He didn't come closer, and I didn't call out to him. But in that silent crowd, amid hundreds of flickering candles, we had a conversation without words. On the drive home, my mind was a tangle. I remembered Daniel's eyes as he buckled the girl's seatbelt, his trembling stance at the edge of the crowd. Maybe he didn't know how to say, sorry. Maybe he thought words were too late. But he was learning to apologize through actions. And sometimes, silent actions speak louder than any words. I wondered, was this what my husband meant when he wrote, "Don't let silence beat you"? Maybe silence wasn't just abandonment. It could also be a way to atone, to show quiet change. And when I nodded tonight, I didn't just forgive him. I forgave myself for holding on to anger too long. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, recalling our childhood. Afternoons running in the backyard, times he held my hand crossing the street, moments he carried me on his back when my feet were tired. Those memories hadn't vanished. They'd just been clouded by his later mistakes. And now, through his quiet actions, those good memories were returning, reminding me that people can change if they truly want to. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if Daniel will ever find the courage to walk up and say sorry outright. But I know one thing. He's chosen not to stand outside my life anymore. And with that small nod tonight, I chose not to close the door forever. But the story doesn't end there. Daniel's presence and welcome project led to a turning point I didn't expect. As his actions spread, people in the community began to notice the story behind it. And from here, my relationship with my brother, and even my mom, would enter a completely new phase, where silence, once again, was challenged by truth. People often ask me, "How did you stay strong through all this?" I always smile, because the answer isn't in one moment, but in an entire journey. And on the 1-year anniversary of my husband's passing, I realized that journey had led me to a completely new place, a place of peace, forgiveness, and freedom. A year later, Welcome Project was no longer a small, scattered effort. It had grown into a nationwide movement. We had thousands of volunteers across over 20 states, from aging veterans to high school students. White vans with "We've Got You" decals appeared at major airports: JFK, LAX, Dallas, Chicago. Every time a family stepped out of arrivals with no one waiting, we were there. We couldn't replace their loved ones, but we could remind them they were never alone. Some mornings I woke up to a phone flooded with thank you messages. A young wife wrote, "Without Welcome Project, I don't know how I'd have managed that first day back." A 10-year-old boy sent a photo of himself beaming in the arms of volunteers, with a scribbled note, "Thanks for picking up me and Mom." Each message was a piece of a puzzle, forming a picture of healing I never thought I'd find. But that journey wasn't without my blood family's shadow. One evening I saw a new voicemail on my phone. It was my mom's voice, hoarse, trembling. "Rachel, I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. I was wrong not to pick you up. I was scared. I thought you were stronger than I realized. I miss you." I listened, silent. Once, a single apology might have made me rush to forgive, to run back to her. But now, I didn't need it. I deleted the voicemail, not out of anger, but because I understood. I didn't need her apology to set myself free. A few weeks later, I received an email about an anonymous donation to Welcome Project's operating fund. It wasn't a large sum, but I recognized the handwriting in the note. "For those who return with no one waiting." It was Daniel. I smiled but didn't reply. I didn't need a conversation. He'd chosen his way, and I chose peace for myself. That year's Memorial Day, I was invited to speak. Washington Square was filled with flags, thousands of candles glowing under the night sky. I stepped onto the stage, holding the microphone, looking out at the sea of people. In that moment, I remembered everything: the cold group chat messages, dragging my suitcase alone at the airport, the soldiers' eyes behind me, the volunteers' smiles holding "We've got you" signs. I took a deep breath and spoke. There are times we think family will always be there to welcome us home, but we learn that's not always true. I learned one thing through pain: you don't rebuild by waiting for others. You rebuild by becoming what they couldn't be. The square fell silent, only the wind whispering. Then applause rose, spreading like ocean waves. I didn't cry. I stood tall, head high, as if making a vow to my husband, to those who'd fallen, and to myself. As the ceremony ended, I stepped down, blending into the crowd. Amid the sea of candlelight, I glimpsed my mom standing far off, her trembling hand holding a small candle. Beside her was Daniel, head bowed. They didn't approach. I didn't walk toward them. A distance remained between us, but this time, it didn't hurt. Because I'd learned, sometimes the greatest punishment isn't anger, it's letting them see you find happiness elsewhere. On the way home, I caught sight of a Welcome Project van pulling out of the parking lot. Through the window, I saw Daniel driving. In the back, a military spouse held her young child, her face easing into comfort. I stood there, watching, my heart suddenly light. I didn't run after him or call his name. I just smiled, a calm smile, as if I'd finally laid the last brick on the bridge to my peace. A year ago, I walked out of an airport alone, believing I'd lost everything. Today, I walked out of a memorial square with thousands by my side, knowing I'd found a new family, one of presence. I no longer waited for group chat messages, no longer craved apologies. I'd learned to let go, and in doing so, gained so much more. As I closed this story, I realized that from a pain I thought I'd never survive, I found the strength to move forward. I learned that blood doesn't always mean family, and presence is the true measure of kinship. I also learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing a more peaceful, lighter life. Compassion doesn't make you weak. It sets you free because you're no longer chained to anger or resentment. Welcome Project gave me a new family, where strangers became support, where a nod replaced 1,000 words of comfort. And I believe anyone can become family to someone else, just by being there when it matters. If this story gave you hope or a new perspective, please leave a comment below. Like, share, and follow my channel to keep spreading these human stories of strength and healing. Because who knows, maybe the next story is the one you need.